Hey everyone, Max Bowen from Citywide Blackout here. Well, it's that time of the year again. In just a few months, the annual Rhode Island Author Expo returns. This event brings together more than 100 authors from all genres. Now, this year will be a lot different, because like so many other events, they decided to cancel the physical one in the interest of public safety. But that doesn't mean the show doesn't happen. In fact, this year it's going all virtual, with panels, author coffee couches, and a whole lot more. And what's more, I'll be the MC of this wonderful event. Now, the whole thing happens on December 5th, and you should definitely check out riauthorexpo.com for more information and a complete list of events. I'll see you there. Welcome back to Citywide Blackout, your home for music, movies, and more. I'm your host, Max Bowen. In this episode, I'm talking with author Caitlin Garvey for her new novel, The Mourning Report, available on October 6th through Homebound Publications. This book looks at the passing of Caitlin's mother and the subsequent battles she had with depression. In writing this book, she interviewed the people who were part of her mother's care, including a hospice nurse, a priest, an estate planner, a hairstylist, and a funeral director. Caitlin shares some of the stories told in these interviews and what they meant to her. My next guest, well, folks, we are talking about her debut book, which is called The Mourning Report. But it is not mourning as in when the sun rises. It is mourning as in to mourn a loss. This book focuses on loss, but exploring that loss to, I guess, craft a fuller story to get the bigger picture behind it. My guest is author Caitlin Garvey. Caitlin, welcome to the show. It is great to have you here, and I'm very much looking forward to this discussion.
Thanks so much, Max. I'm looking forward to it, too.
So this book has, I think, from what I can see, sort of two stories that run more or less parallel to each other. It begins with the passing of your mom from breast cancer, and I'm so sorry for that.
Oh, thanks.
When you were 20 years old, and then following that, you were admitted to a psychiatric hospital after a failed suicide attempt.
Yeah.
Following this, you really, it seemed like you really want to explore everything that your mom went through during her process. So this book is a collection of interviews with the hospice nurse, a priest, an estate planner, the funeral director, all parts of loss, unfortunately. I guess the big question is why you want to do this, why you want to go on this journey and talk to these people.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think a lot of it is that I didn't know the full story of my mom at all. I knew these like bits and pieces of her from obviously being her daughter, but also from things that my dad had told me. But I also wanted to just paint like a fuller picture. And because it was so long after my mom had died, so I started writing the book maybe 10 years after she died. I kind of wanted to understand my own grief more. So I wanted to interview people who were near or working with death in some way or experience grief. And so that's when I had the idea at first to interview the embalmer or my mom's, the funeral director. And so I started the interview process with him and then kind of went backwards and then went to the hairstylist and the hospice nurse and so forth. So I think it was just figuring out really what I wanted to tell, how I wanted to tell my mom's story and what angle I was going to take with it, because it was impossible for me to capture, all aspects of her. So I had to figure out a place to start. And I really just wanted to start with talking to people about their grieving process.
Tell me about your mom.
This is going to be hard for me to answer because she was just so many things, but she was super smart, super witty, hilarious. She was kind of a go with the flow person, but she did have certain OCD qualities probably. And she was just a person who was just going to be fighting for you no matter what, fighting for anyone who was close to her. And she never really gave up.
She sounds like a wonderful person.
Yeah, she was
really
great.
Does. She really does. Now, in talking to the people that you spoke to for this book, what did you glean from it? As a sort of a follow-up question, were you surprised, or did the answers kind of change the story for you?
I didn't know what to expect. And I think a lot of how I originally started the book was figuring out, like, okay, here are my expectations going into this, so I could maybe tie in this theme or that. But then when I actually got into the interview, it was much different. The responses were much different than I expected. So I had to kind of adjust from there. Like, for instance, in the hospice nurse chapter, I go into the interview thinking that the hospice nurse is the person who worked with my mom, but it turns out that's not the case. But it led into this chapter about kind of figuring out your own reality, and if a hospice nurse has patients that have gone through similar things, their story is still important to mine. So figuring out like what it is that they can say about grief that's kind of universal. It doesn't depend just on my own experience.
I'd like to ask a little more about your time after you're admitted to the psychiatric facility. Mm-hmm. And like I said, cut me off whenever you want to, but what happened?
So I was 20. My mom died when I was 18, so this was 2 years after she died. And I wasn't officially diagnosed with depression before then, but I think it was always there. And so I was experiencing grief, but also just kind of just a loss of what to do with my life and who I was. I just felt terrible about myself. And it's kind of that awkward, like when you're 20, you don't really know who you are anyway. So having grief and depression on top of that, or dealing with those things, kind of messed me up a little bit. And so I ended up taking some sleeping pills. And I was living with two roommates at the time, and one of them came into my room and took me to the hospital, which was really nice of her. But yeah, I just remember not necessarily wanting to kill my whole self, but wanting to kill like the part of me that was just grieving so much and feeling kind of lost, if that makes sense.
It does, yeah, because when you lose someone, I think the biggest difference is the biggest thing is that you don't have to think of your whole life without that person.
Exactly.
The role that you thought was always going to be there is suddenly gone, and it's like, wait, that wasn't supposed to happen.
Right. And my mom was the kind of person, too, going back to the question about who she was, that kind of liked to map out certain things in our lives. Like, she had a controlling side to her, which wasn't bad, but I relied on her for direction and guidance and all that. So when that was stripped away, I just had no idea even like who I was without her and all of that. So
how did you work past the grief? How did you work through the depression to get to the point where you were doing better, basically?
Mm-hmm. It's hard to answer because it's not like I'm, fully cured. And I don't think I ever will be, but I have to accept that I'll always be, I don't have to accept that I'll always be depressed, but that if I'm experiencing it, I have tools to cope with it a little bit better. But I think, I don't know, it certainly wasn't the psychiatric facility that helped me. In fact, I wanted to leave there immediately. But I think just talking more with my family and maybe just opening up a little bit more to them, because after my mom died, we didn't talk about anything really. And my dad, he has kind of like a hands-off approach to parenting. He's really kind of laid back. So we just kind of skirted around uncomfortable issues and never really addressed anything. So I think writing this book at first was a way for me to see if I could write through my depression almost. It was a little bit of a naive thought because lots of people have tried doing that and failed. But I don't think I succeeded, but I do think it allowed me to talk about it more openly. And I just realized that's kind of the key, instead of just letting everything fester. Just getting closer with your family and like I say in the book, kind of like savoring little joys and things like that. But for the most part, I think it's just making sure that you're not shutting everyone else out from you. Like I remember when I was thinking about taking my own life, I just felt very isolated and like nobody was caring about me or something. Of course, like those are all just depression thoughts, but I think talking about it more and just being honest about how I was feeling and how weird that feeling was, helped a lot.
I definitely agree. I think you shouldn't be quiet about it. If
Right.
you're feeling depressed, or if you're feeling sad, don't be quiet about it. Tell
Right.
someone, tell anyone.
Exactly.
Definitely, I think is the most important thing, is to don't feel like you're being a burden on someone by telling this thing.
Right.
They want to hear from you. They want to know what's going on. Did you have someone that you could talk to about this? Did you have someone who was sort of your sounding board?
Yeah, I mean, at first, I always did. My family has always been super supportive of me, but I just didn't think that I could talk to them. And I was, like you said, I felt like too much of a burden, like they had their own kind of grief to work through. And I didn't want to, like, I wanted to be like the kind of the rock for them instead of being the person that is complaining all the time. But most of it was, I just needed to open up. I always had the people there that I could open up to, even my roommates who, when I was 20, were living, I had two, I said that, but I could talk to them too. And it just that I felt like I was too scared maybe. And I still feel like that sometimes, where it's like I'm going to burden this person if I tell them how I'm feeling, but I'm trying to get a little bit better at it.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned earlier that you don't consider yourself cured, but I think this is important for the listeners too. It's good to pass on this kind of knowledge. How do you cope when you are feeling down?
That's a good question. A lot of the times I cope pretty badly by watching a lot of TV. And just kind of like zoning out. But I'm working on trying to do healthier things, like taking walks and making sure I'm reading, or at least doing something creative. I haven't written in a while. I finished this book 3 years ago, and usually writing helps me to kind of process things and keeps me kind of sane, but I've stayed away from it for some reason. So instead of doing that, I've tried to look for even like little creative things that will just keep me motivated and healthy, like even just drawing portraits and stuff. I'm a terrible drawer, but
So am I. In doing your interviews for this book, did you go in with like a plan? Did you go in with an intention, or is it more like, let's talk and see what they give me?
Yeah, I think I had like a set of questions I wanted to ask each person. But like I said, I started with the funeral director, and that conversation went like in a completely different direction than I imagined, to the point where he was like giving me specific details about like embalming my mother's body, which was morbid and bizarre. So that definitely wasn't what I expected. And I think a lot of what I didn't expect was how much grief each of the people that I interviewed were experiencing too, even grief from more than 10 years ago. Like the embalmer, for instance, his mother had died when he was 16. And so we kind of had a connection on that level, where it was like, I understand kind of you're thinking about death because of this early loss. I think that was what really united all the interviews, was there was this underlying grief that everyone was talking about, and everyone was kind of unsure and had weird experiences with death that I didn't expect. I wanted to know if they had ever grieved someone. That was, I think, one of my initial questions, but they took it in completely different directions than I anticipated.
Is there one interview out of this whole collection that you feel is a must read? If someone were to read just one chapter, what would it be?
I would have to say the embalmer chapter. I think that, maybe not for people who are scared of more morbid, disgusting stuff, but I think that kind of wraps it up, and it talks mostly about how he views death as it's a family business for him. He's worked since he was a little kid, cremate, like helping his dad cremate bodies and embalming bodies and things like that. So he has kind of a fascinating story. And I think that was probably the most specific memory I had about my mom after she died, was seeing her at the wake and having kind of this bizarre reaction to, or not a bizarre reaction, but like thinking it was bizarre that she was in this shape. And she was on display basically, and how just like the rituals associated with death are kind of creepy when you think about them. It's just something that, we use it to cope and to kind of like heal, but the grief is still there. And it kind of talks about like when you're still grieving 10 years later, who's going to listen to that? Because a lot of people think it should be like neatly wrapped up and, your grief ends after a year or something like that. So it talks more about that too.
I want to talk to you about grief.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, people may think it ends after a certain amount of time, and it doesn't. It's a weight that you carry the rest of your life. Mm-hmm. How do you keep your grief from weighing you down to the point that you can't move?
That's a great question. Some days I don't know the answer to that, honestly. I have to turn it into something. Like, I think that's why I felt like I had to do this book almost, is that I had to kind of transform it and make it into this separate thing that I could hold in my hands. But I think, I don't know, I think it's just kind of, maybe like I said, savoring little joys, like, blaring music in your car or something like that, where you're just living in that particular moment. Yeah, there are definitely a lot of days where I do feel kind of paralyzed by it still. And it's, now it's been 12 years since my mom died. So yeah, I think there's no clear, or at least I don't have a clear answer on that. I think I just kind of take it day by day. And I think that's all you really can do. I know that sounds cliche,
but cliches exist for a reason. And
that's true.
I think that when it comes to loss like this, yeah, it really is day by day. You can't think of the whole thing. Mm-hmm, otherwise, it can kind of drown you.
Right.
One of the things that I really like about your book is the angle. When someone suffers loss and they decide, okay, I'm going to write a book about this, they focus on that. The loss, the person, your angle, you sort of flip the script. You're kind of looking at it from the opposite angle for the folks who worked with your mom. Do you feel like this gave you a unique insight into her experience?
Yeah, and I think probably the most valuable insight I got was from the hairdresser, whose name is Debbie Musso. She was very close to my mom. She did my mom's hair. She helped her find wigs after she lost her hair to the cancer. It felt like kind of a calming presence to be with her and to talk about these things so many years after the fact. She just she was patient with me. She was just very calm and nice. And so I think that gave me the perspective of I always knew everyone is dealing with grief in some way or has experienced sadness, maybe not depression, but sadness. But I think it was just a way for me to get their side of the story without me kind of having tunnel vision on my own memories. And it actually, I think, opened up some of the memories that I had lost. I remembered things more about my mom with her friends that I had previously forgotten. So it was a good way, I think, for me to recover some of those memories. And I think that's really one of the positive things about doing the whole book or doing the interview process for the book was.
Now, given the personal nature of what you talk about, both your own battles with depression and your mom's loss, were you at any point reluctant to put certain things in the book for fear that it was too personal?
Yeah, I was reluctant to put a lot of it, especially the part about just my own mental health and battle in the psychiatric unit. But I really wanted to, I really pushed myself to just say, I'm just going to get it all out there. I also wanted to see if I could get a more well-rounded picture of not just my mom, but myself and see how these memories have impacted me today. Which, like you said, which ones I'm still kind of carrying on to, or the ones that are paralyzing me and not allowing me to go on with my life. So it was good to go back and explore that, not just the actual feeling of those memories, but how I've interpreted them over the years and what that says about me and my, just the way I think about the world. So I learned, a lot more about my mom, but I would say probably way more about myself.
I know that part of this book is looking at the notion of moving on.
Mm-hmm.
That means different things to different people, and I would like to get your take on what moving on entails.
Yeah, I think that's just, it's sort of similar to what we talked about with feeling stuck. My idea of moving on is getting past the feeling of being stuck. And I think in the times I feel the most stuck, I feel like I can't, like I'm kind of just living in the past constantly. Like I have no interaction or meaningful interaction in the present, and I'm dwelling too much on memories, or I'm being kind of like swamped with memories to the point where I can't actually like focus on work or, like look toward the future. So I think to me, moving on means you're able to accept kind of, I guess accept is the word, accept the past for what it is, but be able to still function, to kind of get up every day, go to work, and see a meaning in doing that instead of seeing it as kind of like going through the motions. So I think, I had grand expectations that writing the book was going to like allow me to move on immediately. And once I put it all out there, I'd be able to be like, okay, close that literally. And now I'm, able to move on with my life. But I think it's a slower process, but also a more kind of up and down one. There are obviously days that are better than others, but I think recognizing why you might feel a certain way on a certain day, or if there are certain triggers that maybe spun you into like being stuck, then that is a way of moving on as well.
I think it's important too that you mention why you're feeling bad, like why you're feeling down, to not just say, okay, well, I'm feeling sad today, the end.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Like, I think that's the most useful thing I've learned in therapy, which is like, you need to sit with the emotions instead of just pretending that they're not there, which is something I do a lot, or I did a lot prior to this. But now it's figuring out, okay, was there an event maybe that happened in the day that's triggered some sort of reaction in me, or maybe made me think about the past and maybe dwell on it a little bit more. So I think sitting with it and figuring out why you actually feel this way, or what could be contributing factors to it is really important. And I don't think people really do that enough.
Yeah. I think they just accept it as, oh, well, I'm just sad about, my loved one who passed away. But it's like, no, something happened. Like you said, something happened to trigger that.
Exactly.
Song or something someone said or a sight. And it's important to recognize that. When
you're looking to the future, like even for me, like I'm getting married in a month, and I think things like that where it's like I'm happy about it, but I also have this, I wish my mom was there kind of thing. That can I don't know, it's just interesting for me to analyze it, because it's like I am feeling very happy about this, but on the other hand, I have to acknowledge this like emptiness that I also feel. Whereas before or prior to learning these things in therapy, I think I would just ignore the sad part about it and be like, overall, I'm happy about this event. So I don't have to think about it in like more nuanced ways.
Well, first off, congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
It's amazing news. It's really, really good news. For what it's worth, I would say she is there. She is with you, in every way that matters. She is there. My personal take on it is that when someone passes away, they don't leave us. They're still part of our lives in a very meaningful way. And your mom's definitely proud of you.
Oh, thank you so much for saying that. That helps a lot, honestly.
Now, this book is scheduled to be published on October 6th, being done through Homebound Publications. So big thanks to them, because they helped get all this put together. How did you find them?
Gosh, it was a few years ago now. But I remember I was looking at, poetsandwriters.org. So I was looking through there, and they had Homebound had a poetry competition. And I'm not a poet, and I wasn't going to enter, but it made me look into their site a little bit more, and led me to find Leslie Browning, who's incredible. And I really just liked her mission statement, her whole company's mission statement, and what they, how they give back. And I thought I might as well submit my manuscript and see what they say. And so it was lucky.
Your reaction when you found out that you had been accepted?
Oh, I was ecstatic. I think I was screaming and jumping up and down. But yeah, it was a really good day, and it had taken a few years for me to publish it. Like I remember like shopping it out a little bit, but people were like, "Oh, we're not accepting memoirs right now because they don't sell that much." And so just that somebody like finally believed in a personal story was kind of incredible.
How does it feel now to be at the point where the book is done, editing is done, it's ready to be released out there in the world for everyone to see?
Yeah, don't remind me. No, I'm just kidding. No, it feels good. I'm for the most part very excited. I do have, like I said, some kind of anxiety about it. Like everyone's reading this very personal thing. I think as soon as when the advanced copies were sent out and strangers started reviewing it, that was a little nerve-wracking for me because I was just like, well, I'm giving you like the most like personal thing I can think of, and you're a stranger to me, and obviously that's part of writing a memoir. But it just felt like a vulnerability that you weren't sure. Like you couldn't even interact with the person on the receiving end necessarily. So I'm definitely anxious about that still. But I'm in general very excited and proud of myself.
It's like you hit the send button and you sit back and say, okay, now we wait.
Yeah, exactly. Like you're bracing yourself. Yeah.
Right. I love the cover art, by the way.
Oh,
I
thanks.
love the image. What led to that being the choice for the cover?
That's a great question. That's my mom and me as a baby and my mom on the cover. I wanted a kind of a happier picture where she's smiling. And my cousin actually sent me this one, and I was like, this is the best one. Because I don't know, it's kind of like, it's not like your typical mother-daughter picture, I don't think. It's just kind of like, I have my fingers in my mouth, and my mom's just kind of like laughing at me, and she has like a spit up bib on her shoulder. But yeah, so I liked, it's kind of like how kind of funny it was. But I think it represented just like, I wanted a picture of her happy. I mean, it's called The Mourning Report, so it could be like a really bleak image, but I did want her to be smiling.
Why that title? I don't ask this question much, but given the subject matter, I'm really curious as to why you wanted that phrase on the book.
Yeah. Like morning reports in hospitals and stuff are like, they go around and take the patient's signs and give, updates on the patient. And so I was thinking about it in terms of like, in medical terms, really. And then I thought of it as kind of like, since I am, going through all these steps to interview people, it was my reporting of my own grief, but also collecting other people's. So I wanted that to be reflected in the title. And so I just wanted kind of a more general title too. So it's the medical play on words, but also the reporting aspect of it, of the interviews and figuring out how other people are managing on their ends.
What do you hope people get out of reading this?
I think my biggest hope is that they get a sense that like so many people are experiencing grief that doesn't just stop after a certain amount of time. And I think realizing that it's okay to still suffer from grief and also to still suffer from depression, even if you've tried a ton of medicine and many years of therapy. I think it's just important to feel like someone like you is out there, I guess. But most importantly, just like maybe to be a little bit more aware of the grieving process for everyone, how, yeah, it's really different. But like you said, it is kind of a lifelong thing. Your life has changed for good once you lose someone. And you kind of have to figure out every single day how to navigate that and what what you'll face, I guess, in the future.
Well, Caitlin, thank you so much for talking to me. I really appreciate this. It's great to learn about the story. And folks, pick up The Mourning Report, available October 6th through Homebound Publications, print and ebook versions. Mm-hmm. Maybe an audiobook down the road?
Yeah, I hope so.
Well, Caitlin, where do folks go if they want to learn more about you and to check out the book?
Yeah, so you can visit my website at CaitlinHoganGarvey.com, and you can go on Homebound Publications website for more information about the book as well. It's also on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and things like that. So yeah.
One more thing before we go. Is there another book down the road?
I hope so. I haven't been writing much. I think I needed to kind of process this and see, and wait to at least see what the response is, and see like how I feel about the response before I write something else. I do have like a couple of ideas in exploring like maybe fantasy and escapism and things like that. So I think writing some essays on that would actually clarify a lot of things for me. So maybe eventually.
Well, I'm a huge fantasy fan, so I definitely hope that happens. And again, congratulations on the book.
Thank you so much.
I really hope it helps a lot of folks out.
Oh, thank you so much, Max.
Hi, this is singer Kate Eppers, and you're listening to Citywide Blackout.
Picture this. You finished your first book and nailed it. The plot, the characters, all the twists and turns. This one's a winner. And all you need is the right cover. If you've got my art skills, this is the part where panic usually sets in. Enter the cover villain, hero to writers everywhere. Founded by noted author Remy Flagg, Cover Villain focuses on composite image covers for science fiction and fantasy writers. Give them the details, and they'll craft a cover using popular trends that everyone will want to see. But wait, you say, I've got ideas of my own. No problem, as Cover Villain loves a good collaboration. As they say, our goal is to put a little villain in every cover we make. Want to know more? Then head to covervillain.com and follow them on Facebook and Instagram. All right, folks, that brings this episode to a close. You can follow the show on Facebook under Citywide Blackout and Twitter and Instagram under Citywide Max. Listen to the show on Podbean, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, Amazon Music, and every Saturday at 10 p.m. on Boston Free Radio. As always, keep those ears open.